right, welcome to Homegrown Table Talk. We're going to be talking with Peggy and Brian here, two folks who have broken into an industry, really a way of life that is intimidating to me. Growing your own produce, doing it in a sustainable way in I consider kind of a hostile environment, a dry climate. So I'll go ahead and let you guys go right into introductions here. Peggy.
I'm Peggy Martin. I co-own Cedar Creek Gardens with Bud Mankey. We are about in the middle of nowhere, halfway between Padoka and Murdo, and south of 1880 town, just off of the White River.
All right. And Brian.
Brian Stambaugh. So we have Bell Valley Ancient Grains near Newell, South Dakota. Grew up in that area on a dairy farm, moved to Rapid City, School of Mines, and 40 years engineering in oil and gas, and returned to the farm about 19 years ago.
Wow. So that's breaking in, going from, leaping right in, going from oil and gas and technology and going right into growing your own produce. Was the transition easier because you had that background?
Yeah, having grown up on a dairy farm, I sort of knew the ropes a little bit, even though I was quite small when we moved to Rapid City. But it was just the knowledge was able to get going with it. So.
Okay, I ask because, this is something that, you look and you see gardens around town or whatnot, or you see, places that are growing their own produce and you're thinking, can I do that? I don't know, that seems a lot. So you wonder, how does someone even start with something like this? Peggy, how did you get started?
We were just going to grow some food for our families. And then one thing led to another. We ended up getting a season extension called a high tunnel. And if you have one of them, you might as well have several because they're about as much maintenance as a 2-year-old child. There's a lot of it's a totally different environment in which you grow with the season extensions.
That's what's intimidating to me, is that it's a lot of work. You got to make sure that you are, there's maintenance, there's the weather, which can play a role. Now, if you have greenhouses, that helps, but you're also looking at, most people starting on a small scale. Well, Brian, can you talk a little bit about how this affects local communities when you have either a group of individuals getting started, or what you have noticed from what you guys are doing?
Well, it's been terrific. The produce you get locally, generally at farmers markets, is good, highly nutritious, and locally grown helps the small producers in the area, and it's a win-win for everyone.
So would you say it's less of an industry and more of a way of life?
I'd say, yeah, kind of a way of life, I think. Yeah, it's been a transition that way.
That's the way I think of it. Really, because I go to the grocery store, I have an idea of where my food might come from, but honestly, I read the labeling and just hope that's where it's coming from. But if I'm going to you guys as a source, I know where it's coming from. I know who is growing it, and I know where it's coming from. How did you pick your location? Is that just where you started out towards Murdo?
Bud grew up there, and so the garden is actually at the place where he grew up.
Wow.
And again, we were just going to start small. We both, our parents gardened, but I didn't have to get involved unless I was naughty, then I had to pull weeds. So, again, we kind of, we're just going to start out growing for our families. But when we first started, there wasn't a whole lot of people. There wasn't farmers markets in our area. There were none.
Wow.
And so a lot of times when we went to town, we were the farmers market. There was no other vendors. And we just started growing a little bit, and then we get a little bigger and a little bit, and then we picked up some wholesale accounts. We have a couple organic stores, and Rapid City Regional Hospital, or Monument Health now, is one of our biggest clients.
So, and to be clear, historically, the farmers market used to be one of the only ways that you got your food. And it just kind of disappeared. How does something like that even happen in an area as rural as this? And what gave you the idea to kind of expand this? Or, was it the idea of connecting with people? Or, what really got that going?
Well, it was more on the economic side. We didn't want to have to keep working second jobs.
Yeah.
And so you're not going to be able to be sustainable by doing just one market. You've got to have other avenues, because as more and more people get in it, there's more and more vendors at the farmers market, so you get a little bit less of the pie. But on one hand, but on the other hand, the more vendors there are, the more people attend the market too. Yeah. So it can increase your sales, but we just looked for different avenues. And because of our geolocation, it was really a challenge logistically to be able to get our produce out. I mean, it's 30 miles to town.
Yeah.
And so we worked out a deal with the local car dealership. So they come to Rapid and they come up empty, so they will do 3 stops for us.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, and we pay them, to do stops, but still it's not, we wouldn't be able to pay a driver and rent a van or, buy a van and all that kind of stuff. So you have to be pretty creative in rural South Dakota to be able to logistically move your product and to be able to be viable.
Brian, have you found that to be kind of one of those challenges, as well as transportation, getting started, trying to make those connections?
Yeah, that's a big thing, is marketing and making the connections. And we've tried some different things. Etsy, set up a shop on Etsy, an online store. We joined an entity called Harvest Host, where RVers will come to stay at the farm overnight, and they will buy fresh milled flour, and they're fascinated with the whole process of that, and that's been a good marketing avenue also. And
I mean, you think about, we've been through the pandemic, and you were just talking about how things skyrocketed as far as the milling was concerned. So there are avenues of not only a way of life, but economic benefits to this. We really want to dig more into this concept that it's a way of life. It's nice to grow your own food, but we're starting to see a little bit of a comeback here, as people, not only people wanting this, but finding out the benefits of having locally grown produce and what that can do for South Dakota. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Homegrown Table Talk. I'm joined by Brian and Peggy, and we've been kind of talking about getting things going, how you even start to grow your own produce, the challenges that you face at first. I think this is important to kind of still hone in on this subject, is that the initial challenges of getting things like this going. Brian, you were mentioning something about value, about farming today, or growing your own produce today is not the same as it was 50 years ago for many different reasons. But what were some of your points about that? Yeah, so we grew up on a dairy in the 1960s up by Newell, and 100 small dairy, 30 cows, and you could sort of make a living at that scale at that time. But generally, small farms struggle. A couple of hundred acres or so. It's tough to make it go. So that's what we were looking for in starting this, is some type of value-added crop, and perhaps similar with Peggy. That how do you extract more value from the land? But in that process, and in growing the ancient wheat, it sort of made me think differently about food too, about where it's produced, and healthier food. So it's been a process that way too. So it's opening your eyes to not only, so you're opening the avenue to kind of a cultural insight about where we get our food from as Americans. Where does it come from? Where is it grown? Who grows it? And when you're the one who's doing that, it opens up all those questions then. And Peggy, you were talking about initially, trying to get things started. It's like, we're going to go for this. How many hours a week were you talking about when you were getting things going?
A lot. But we still have, even currently, even 10 years down the road, we still put in 80-hour weeks.
Wow.
It's not, you don't get a day off. Rarely, somebody still has to be there, especially with our season extensions. Somebody is at the farm 24/7 at the gardens.
Wow.
Because if the wind comes up, you got to get the tunnels shut down, or they're just going to, go up like a kite. And so it's a challenge to be able to have, I always say, but my life before tomatoes, all these things
Right.
because it's a commitment. It's a huge commitment. But there's also such satisfaction in knowing that you are feeding people nutritious, healthy foods, and they begin to trust you. It's like, okay, I'm going to go get something. I don't want to eat pesticides and all of the things that come, and just the quality is so much better. I have people comment all the time, "Oh, when I buy your lettuce, it lasts for like days, and if I get something at the store," and I'm like, "Well, how old is it before it gets to the store?"
Wow. Yeah.
Because mine is only, I like when we ship, we pick one day, and then we get it chilled, and then we ship the next. So most of the produce that you get from us isn't even 24 hours.
So you're speaking truth to the food that we're eating, saying, listen, I grew this. This is what I am selling you. And so there is there's a handshake, there's a smile, you're associating this food with a person rather than this innate object when you walk into a store. And, it's just there, you pick it out, and maybe you interact with the person at the checkout line. And I'm serious. This is an important aspect of food. Sitting down, having a meal with family, so on and so forth. That, in my lifetime, has slowly edged away as we become more and more busy as people. That is really something that is prominent in our society. And
I really agree, because the last year I have seen more people reconnect with where their food comes from, and not just where the food comes from, but who is growing it. I mean, I have people that will private message me, say, "Hey, I saw you guys didn't get any rain," or they'll check in and say, "Hey, are you guys gonna be here?" Or I saw that. And it's just, they become a sense of family. I mean, really, they're checking on us not just because, do you have the tomatoes ready?
Right.
But I know your kid is graduating this year or whatever. But it really builds a community across the state, I think. Anyway, I know that I have friends from all over now that I never even knew before because of the produce that we grow.
Brian, have you shared that experience up in your neck of the woods?
Yeah, some of when we're not growing wheat, we're growing hay for local horse people, and they come back year after year and just kind of become really good friends. So same customers coming back. But we had an experience the last few days with campers that were staying with us, and a lot of these people are from big metro areas, they're just in awe of the area and the agriculture, and have never seen anything like this. So some of the campers had some 10, 11-year-old kids. So we were milling flour from this wheat, and let him dump the flour into the mill, and then see the flour. Flour comes out, and then take in the aroma of fresh. So that makes an impact on those kids and the parents that they won't forget. So
does it make the long hours easier?
Yeah, it's kind of makes it worth it. It's fun. So connecting with the people, I think it's pretty interesting.
So you would encourage then, if you haven't tried local produce, that you might just look at the way that you do a lot of things differently. It's not just going and saying, "Hey, I purchased this thing from a local producer," and then that's the end of the conversation. You're actually transitioning into something, maybe a little bit more of a conversation about where and how and who we get our food from.
Yep, and especially with the agro-tourism, I guess you'd say, that people coming out to visit from areas and being able to give them that knowledge of the culture, and making good friends.
I mean, I'll be honest, it's not something that I really questioned too much about where my food came from. I just went to the store and bought it. As someone who was in my early 20s, you just went, you got your stuff, you went home. That was number 6 on the list of things that was important to me, is about where my food came from, who I'm eating it with, all of that. And I think when you are making the effort to, connect with someone, connect with the food they're growing, knowing it's local, you are psychologically changing the way that you are going about your life. honestly. I mean, would that be?
One other thing as far as the flour milling, in the late 1800s, there were 300 flour mills in South Dakota, and I think by 1960 there was one, which was Tri-State Milling downtown, and that's now Dakota Mill. And now all the wheat is shipped, basically all the wheat is shipped out and comes back as refined flour. So it'd be nice to be able to impact that a little bit through the the produce and the flour and wheat.
That's an important conversation. Glad you brought that up. We're going to be talking about more about this when we come back. All right, welcome back to Homegrown Table Talk, joined by Brian and Peggy, and we've been getting on the subject about how local produce has changed how you guys live, how people who actually purchase your goods, how it's changing them, how it's changing the economy as a whole. I mean, we're talking a lot of things happening with COVID-19, people starting to realize, kind of have a check of, food is a commodity that I can grow myself. How excited is it to see people getting into gardening? I mean, do you see this competition, or are you more excited to see that people are in it now?
I don't see this competition. I mean, if they, they're not going to be able to grow everything they need. And let me rephrase that. They could grow everything they need, but a lot of people don't have the space.
Right.
And so, I don't think, it harms to throw a couple tomato plants in, a zucchini plant in,
sure,
whatever it is that your family will eat, but they're still not going to grow massive amounts. They're not going to have everything, because they probably don't have room for watermelon. So they're going to go, if I had watermelon, and they'll come visit our farm stand or the farmers market.
So this is a tight-knit community then. You got local producers working, and you were talking about, local producers working together in the sense that, if someone doesn't get rain, like, boy, I hope they're doing okay. Yeah. They've had a rough start. Boy, they got drought. Haven't gotten enough rain. Speaking of, how difficult is it to grow out here in western South Dakota with the weather? Yeah, I can tell. Easy, right? We don't get any wind. We don't get any hail. No thunderstorms. No blizzards. No nothing. Yeah, tell me how that process works out. She's like, I don't even want to start.
He has a lot more acres in.
Hail and dry weather. We're on irrigation, so we're lucky that way. But I guess hail and wind are the big things. And 2015, it was mentioned that we had grapefruit-sized hail and wiped out one of our buildings, and so just kind of a South Dakota thing. So I was asking Peggy. I said, do you like the challenge of that? It was like, no, not at all. If we didn't have to deal with it at all, it'd be great. But I will say, I was shocked when I first started looking at the local produce that is grown here. It's like, wait, this was grown here? How? In these elements, we're able to grow this out here? So it takes a lot of determination then to kind of etch that out.
And it takes a lot of being willing to adapt.
Okay.
I will have to say that we were very lucky when we started Cedar Creek Gardens, because Bud had an infrastructure. He had a good well. He had a spring-fed well. And he had ample land. So that wasn't an issue for us. But just dealing with, every year is a different year. Last year grasshoppers were like horrendous.
Yes, they were. I remember that.
And so we don't want to spray our gardens. How do you deal with grasshoppers when you're not going to spray? And then because of our location, we have wildlife. We have deer, we have rabbits, and we have rattlesnakes. So, you're out there in a solid field covered of vines with pumpkins or watermelons, and you hear the rattle. Do you run? Do you stay? And Bud and I'm usually on the road, so I don't have to do a lot of the picking. But Bud and the crew, they pick, and there's just the pumpkin pitching till you kill the rattlesnake, or you're throwing watermelons if you don't happen to have a shovel handy. But
I never thought of bunnies and deer as adversaries, but now But now I can see you all coming out to a field of rabbits. No! So to me, I'm just trying to picture, this lifestyle where these are the things you're fighting against. For us, for people in town, a thunderstorm is an inconvenience. You don't get to go to the pool for the day, or you got to wait an hour. But a hailstorm can be, devastating for someone who's trying to grow produce, or if you have, grasshoppers or drought or all these other things. So, on top of the crazy weather that South Dakota has, you have the normal things you have to worry about when it comes to produce, like economics and whatnot. So it almost makes buying local that much more important in a place like Western South Dakota. Absolutely. To support you all out here trying to make this happen. And it sounds like it's a growing idea that everyone who is starting to get into it is starting to realize the benefits of it, not only just from an economical sense, but like we were talking about, family sense and things of that nature.
I think I see that more in our area at Newell. More younger families coming in that have chickens and a garden and sort of maybe seeing it more lately, maybe the past year or two, where there's more interest from young families and having that kind of lifestyle.
So where do we go from here? Where does it go? Who should start this process? What if I have an acre of land? Should I just get going right now and start planting my own stuff? What would your guys' quick advice to someone starting out?
I would say it doesn't hurt anybody to start and have a little bit of food security sense. Put in a few tomato plants and a few lettuce or zucchini or whatever it is that your family will eat. That's another thing I see is that people are used to grab and go pizza or run through and grab a cheeseburger. And, one of the biggest challenges of selling fresh produce or maybe not a sack of white flour, but a different kind of texture that the flour that they do, is they don't know how to cook.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really, it's like, well, what would I do with the zucchini? Well, you could make zucchini pizza. Your children would like that.
Yeah.
If you put it on the barbecue grill, you don't have to heat up your house.
Well, I wanted to let you both know that this was an important conversation, not only for people that are watching, but for me. I'm trying to understand this better. I'm trying to, change my narrative and perspective on food, where I get it, who I get it from, and you both have convinced me of the merits of this, and I appreciate your time. This was important. I'm glad we had this discussion. Make sure you join us next time here on Homegrown Table Talk for more.